Lesley, how lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Can I ask you, first of all, to explain, in the context of this AQE session on mercury monitoring, can you very briefly, first of all, explain why mercury emissions are important and maybe what has happened since the Minamata Convention was adopted?
Okay, well, the UN identified mercury as the pollutant of greatest global concern back in the late 90s. And as a result of that, they kick into action to evaluate global emissions to work out where they're coming from and who needs to do what to pull those into line. So the Minamata Convention was signed and ratified a couple of years ago. It has lots of areas. Obviously, it covers coal combustion, waste incineration, all the industrial sources, but also artisanal small-scale gold mining, the use of mercury in batteries and medical machinery and so on. So there's an awful lot of areas to cover. Quick background on mercury. Mercury is a fun substance, as we know, great to play with back in the day. You're not allowed to do that anymore. Unfortunately, the methyl mercury form does get into your bloodstream, crosses the blood-brain barrier, can cause severe neurological problems, mainly a problem for developing infants. So therefore, it's important for pregnant and breastfeeding women to be aware of their mercury intake. For most other people, mercury is not that much of an issue as yet. However, concentrations are still increasing. The rate of increase is slow, but still increasing. We still have mercury being mined in some areas. We still have mercury being used for small-scale gold mining, and we don't know what quantities are being used there because it's an illegal use. How do you quantify it? So my area of concern is industrial emissions, specifically from coal combustion. And obviously, the rate of mercury emissions is going to relate to the amount of coal used. And that is still increasing globally. It's coming down in developed regions, but in places like India, Indonesia, it's continuing to increase. We do know how to control those emissions, but the control can be expensive. And that is the challenge, is that the people that can at least afford to control their mercury emissions are the ones that are being asked to do so.
Sure, sure. And what role does monitoring have to play in helping to combat mercury emissions?
I tried to Google this earlier, who came up first with the phrase, that which can be measured can be controlled. Basically, you don't know what you've got until you start counting it.
Yeah.
How much garlic do you put in a stew? You've got to know how much you've got, got to know what level is too much, and you've got to keep monitoring as you put it in. For countries such as those we're working with in India, Indonesia, Thailand, so on, they don't have that information. So they're working from basic emission factors for coal, which may not apply to their coals.
Right.
So in order to get a gauge on whether they have low mercury coals or they have high emissions or whatever, they really need to be monitoring, because what works in the developed regions may not work for them. And obviously we want any control strategy to be appropriate.
Okay, well that leads us on nicely to the Mercury section of the AQE conference, which is on day 2, which is the 14th of October. This time it's going to be virtual, so hopefully that will mean that more people from some of the countries that you talked about will be able to participate in the event without having to jump on a plane. And so could you give us a very brief summary of the type of presentations that will take place on day 2?
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't have picked these myself better. In fact, maybe I did in a dream, because the lineup is exactly what you want. I mean, you've got me to start with introducing it, saying basically what I'm saying now, the importance of mercury emissions. But then we have David Graham from Uniper talking about global mercury monitoring, where it's required and what kind of monitoring methods they're using. We have Freeman from the Environment Agency talking about the specifics for the UK and BREF for the European challenge. We've got Warren from PS Analytical talking about the actual monitoring systems, the continuous emission monitors, the kind of systems that you really want to just bolt on it and get running. They're giving you mercury emissions details in real time. That is the goal and the dream. We then have Johannes from BDC talking about reference methods and sorbent traps. And sorbent traps is what we're seeing being used in India and Indonesia because they cannot afford to be putting continuous emission monitors in all their plants yet. So a sorbent trap is a one-off, stick it in there, see if it works, maybe repeat it every couple of months, get a handle on the range of emissions, and maybe develop an emission factor for your coal or for your plant, so that you can continue to run that plant without having to invest in costly continuous monitors. And then finally, we have Sean from Ohio Lumex, who are legends in the fields of developing, producing and marketing these sorbent traps.
Yeah.
So it's everybody you want to talk to about mercury monitoring is going to be there for that session.
Fantastic. So I believe what the organisers tell me about the platform is that hopefully there'll be some time for people to ask questions to the speakers, but the time control is going to be critical, because people will be dropping in and out from all over the world, and if they want to drop in on a session on solvent traps, they don't want to accidentally drop in on a second session on particulate monitoring from a different time of day because it's run over or something. The sessions will be run according to time, which may mean there isn't much time for questions, but I'm led to believe that all of the participants at the event will be provided with the contact details, or at least the names and job titles and organisations for all of the other people who are there. So they will be able to arrange meetings to ask questions and seek advice. So there'll be hopefully a kind of a big online networking activity going on at the same time. So I wanted to make that point as well. But that sounds fascinating. I absolutely agree with you. I think that it should be an event that provides people with the opportunity to get the answers to the questions that they need about which regulations apply to them and how they can best meet at least the monitoring requirements to meet those regulations. So thank you so much for helping put that together. It's fantastic, and I look forward to watching it.
I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, Graham.
Thanks a lot, Lesley.